All right, good evening, everybody. To our team tonight, if you can locate our guest, I see Director Brian O'Hara is already on. If you all can please locate him and make him a co-host, as well as Director Spruill, if you all can locate her and make her a co-host as well. I'm not sure what name Director Spruill is up under.
Hello, Pastor. Both of them are co-hosts.
Phenomenal. Thank you. Hey, it's time to go to work. It's 7 o'clock. Good evening, everybody. Again, welcome tonight to our very, what I'm calling, transformative time of study, enlightenment, and knowledge. It's a transformative hour. That's exactly what this has become on Wednesday nights. And I'm so grateful and thankful that the people of God and that you all have embraced this very informative way of not only imparting God's word and studying God's word, but also, in the words of that Swiss theologian Karl Barth, to have a Bible in one hand and a newspaper in the other. And that's exactly what we try to do on Wednesday night. And if you have a newspaper in the other hand, I'm sure you've seen something about policing in our country and in our cities. You have read something of that magnitude, or you have seen it on television, or you have watched the trial of George Floyd, Trayvon Martin, and names, and the list, Breonna Taylor, and the names go on and on. It's a laundry list of names. And so tonight, I want to thank you all. I see many persons are coming on social media. Your numbers are growing quickly. What I need you to do on Facebook tonight, I need you to like, I need you to love, I need you to comment, but I need you to share this tonight. I need you to share it with as many persons as you can share it with on tonight, so that they can be a part of this time of transformative study and enlightenment as well. If you are on YouTube, welcome. Thank you. If you're on the website, if you are on our app, welcome tonight. I welcome each and every one of you on the various platforms that we are streaming on. And so let's continue to invite others. And I know, it's still the typical Black church. We're going to come on late. We still going to make that 5 minutes after and that 10 minutes after, but we'll be long down the road, sisters and brothers. So we try to respect persons' time, especially our guests tonight. Let me begin with a word of prayer. Our gracious God and Father, how we honor you and thank you. We adore you and we love you, oh God. Thank you that we were able, God, to witness the rising of the sun, although cloudy, the going down of the same. So God, we thank you that we're still among the living. We're still breathing. We're still halfway in our right minds tonight. We had enough sense to log on to this Zoom or to come on Facebook or YouTube or the website or the app. And so, God, we thank you for the activity of our limbs and thank you for clothing us in our right mind. God, we thank you now for what our eyes will see and ears will hear tonight. Very serious study on policing in America. We pray now, God, not only for our law enforcement community, but we pray for our community as well, especially the two directors joining us tonight, Director O'Hara and Director Spruill. Endow them, God, with protection and wisdom as they lead their particular police departments. And God, we thank you now for your spirit that will be a part of this fruitful discussion tonight. In Jesus' name we pray. And all of God's children said, thank God and amen. Once again, welcome tonight. It is coming up on 7:04. We kick it off right at 7:05. And so our guest tonight is Director Brian O'Hara and Director Cuvella Spruill. Director O'Hara of the Newark Public Safety and Director Spruill of Franklin Township Police Department. They are our guests tonight, and I'm extremely excited because I now, sisters and brothers, being on the inside for just a few weeks and almost a month, I know how difficult their job is. And one of the things my brother, who may tune in a little bit, is that remember, your job is not to be a thorn in the director's flesh. You stay out of his way, and he's going to probably stay out of your way. You just do what he tells you to do and get your work done. Director O'Hara is my boss, y'all. with this new appointment by Mayor Raz Baraka. He is technically, I'm just the deputy director, but he is the director. And so Director Sproul likewise is very dear to me, and she's a part of the St. James Church family. She is a member of our church. And so I appreciate both of them. Let me say before we get started, they are not the enemy. I know we got social media. I can't control that. I do control the questions because I ask the questions. We got YouTube. We got a whole lot of folk out there. Activists, you get your turn on the third Wednesday, May the 19th. But these two particular individuals are not the enemy. They're my friend. And so I stand with them and stand alongside them. And so I want to be clear on that tonight. They are not the enemy, sisters and brothers. They both have a good heart and a good spirit, and they are community driven. The both of them are community driven. And so Director Sproul, I'm going to ask that you allow us you be home court, so we allow the guests to come tonight. Since you're from St. James, we allow Director O'Hara. So you allow Director O'Hara to kick us off, and he will share with us what he wants to share in these next 10 to 15 minutes. And then likewise, Director Sproul will come. I know it's ladies first, but we're doing home court tonight, and Director O'Hara is our guest tonight, and he's also my boss as well. So Director O'Hara, welcome.
I wanted to say congratulations to him, by the way, Pastor. I never had the chance to say that.
Oh, awesome.
Thank you so much, Director. Appreciate it.
Awesome. All right, Director O'Hara, welcome. Welcome, sir. It's on you. It's on you. Any way you want to share tonight, it's on you.
Well, thank you so much, Pastor. It's an incredible honor to be here with you, with the St. James congregation. Historic congregation, a congregation that's been very good to us at the police department over the years. You all have opened your doors to us. We've held community meetings there and so on. And it's an incredible honor to be here with you all, your congregation, friends, Director Sproul, a veteran law enforcement leader in the county and now out in Franklin Township. So just thank you all for that. Pastor, you started off with a prayer. Let us all with a prayer. And thank you so much. Everyone, please, like the pastor said, we certainly need your prayers every day. I know, Lord knows I do. And I just ask that you all, pray for me personally, as well as all of our officers here in Newark, because the decisions that we make have consequences. And prayerfully, we make the best decisions possible, all of us, each and every day. So like Pastor mentioned, I started as the public safety director April 1st. So now together with him as the deputy director, we've been in this a little bit more than a month. Prior to that, I worked on the issues around police reform and the consent decree here in Newark for the last 5 years. I've been a Newark police officer for 20 years. And mainly, I think kind of the focus of my career up until this point has been issues around police reform. And I know everyone probably knows that there is a consent decree, may not be that familiar with it, what's been going on with that in Newark. And basically the consent decree happened because the federal government did an investigation in the Newark Police Department and found a pattern of practice of unconstitutional conduct by police officers here in Newark. And what that means is they basically found all that stuff, like Pastor was saying, that that we hear about as being wrong with policing in the U.S., that we see news reports on TV and so on, stuff around excessive force, inappropriate arrests and stops, ineffective and internal affairs processes. All those types of things are stuff that's covered under the consent decree. And through that process, we've reformed a number of the policies for the department, about 12.5 policies. We've created 40 hours of new training for police officers, which was kind of desperately needed, at least here. And like I mentioned before, we used the space at St. James to hold some of those community forums, those community meetings. And I think what's different about the way police reform has kind of played out in Newark is that the community was welcome to come to meetings like that and actually have their voice be heard and have community input and actually receive feedback from the department on things that folks thought needed to be changed. And thankfully, we have the mayor that we have, Mayor Baraka, who has been, he's a believer in all this reform and all these initiatives, even without the consent decree. So through his leadership, I think we've been able to sustain a lot of these changes and kind of just, look towards, what we need to continue to do in the future, which is, part of the reason why, Pastor Slaughter is now on the team with us. Pastor is, in his other role, is assuming the role of Deputy Director of Community Relations. He's been speaking with our community service officers here and just trying to help us think about what else we need to do in regards to community engagement and community involvement moving forward in the future. So what that looks like up until this point has been Newark has at two community service officers that are assigned to all 7 of our police precincts. Pastor got to meet with all of them, and they all gave him presentations on the different work that they do. And some folks here in the congregation may be familiar with your local community service officer, but basically what they've been doing over the last few years is they're full-time officers that they don't respond to calls for service, but they're out there trying to connect with different community groups, stakeholders in the community, young people and groups of young people, and trying to identify ways to help rebuild trust, basically. So they're out there addressing community problems, community concerns, but they're also out there doing stuff that cops in Newark never did before. Last year, Officer Bobby Moore was, out there on South Orange Avenue handing out roses to mothers on Mother's Day. Other officers, at home cooking soup, bringing soup in to, a different street corner, giving out soup to folks in the community. So it's a whole bunch of, just stuff that's happening on the community engagement level that these officers are coming up with on their own, that, it all sounds great, but it has been paying real dividends. There's been real success and real results from it. Some of those officers that are out there, have pulled up on scenes that, there's a crowd forming. Things might be a little tense between officers and some folks that are out on the street corner, but they see our officers, our community service officers, when they pull up, they'll say, hey, I know that officer. That's a good guy, and it helps to de-escalate things. I think one of the, in terms of how reform has brought results in Newark, I think the greatest thing you could look at is what actually happened here over the last year. So basically, after George Floyd was murdered almost a year ago, every major city in the country had, large scale protests and folks voicing their frustration. But a lot of those, in virtually everywhere else in the country, resulted in large scale civil unrest with property damage and then associated violence after that. The truth is that type of thing did not actually happen in Newark, even though there were thousands of people that came out to protests. And actually, there were a couple hundred people who came on May 30th to the first precinct on 17th Avenue, with intentions to burn the building down and to destroy police vehicles, like they had like we have seen happen in other cities at that time. And the only reason that didn't happen in Newark that day, and the reason why things remained calm, is because folks from the community stood up and got between the police officers that were there and the folks from the outside who came to do damage and to burn things down and to break windows, and told them, no, you're not going to do that here. And that's well documented on videos that we have, and media outlets have reported it. And that's what's made the real difference here in Newark in terms of what happened last year with protests. The other thing that's significant, second thing that's significant with what happened last year that's related to that, is because Newark didn't have the level of looting and unrest that other cities had, Newark was able to leave our officers in the neighborhoods last summer, addressing issues and so on. So unlike the rest of the country that then exploded like with violence and problems around crime because officers were being pulled out of neighborhoods to go into downtown areas to maintain property, basically with store windows that had been looted and so on. Newark was able to maintain the same level of safety that we had the year prior, which is also dramatically different than the rest of the country. And I think the other thing I'd like to highlight about last year that just shows how different Newark is today than the past, which is also related, is as a result of all these forms, and also because of the grace of God, Newark got through last year without one single police-involved shooting. There wasn't one time last year that a police officer in Newark shot a person or shot at a person. And that has never happened before in modern history in this city. And we think that's just, the culmination of all these results of the dedication of folks from the community who have been partners with us in this process. And it just shows undeniably that there has been change. When I was an officer 20 years ago, we had at least 20 shootings, sometimes more than 20 shootings of people every year in this city. And incredibly, there were times I remember that we had more than one instance of police shooting someone in this city in one day. So more than one police shooting in a single day. And just to say that we got through an entire calendar year without that happening once, I think speaks volumes to just the synergy, the leadership that there has been in this city, and the work that has been done around these issues of reform. And just prayerfully, now that we're here in these positions, we hope and we pray that each day we're working to continue to build upon that process. And we've been very fortunate here that, going more towards the issues of crime and law enforcement, that there's a number of groups in the city that are community-based, that are looking to do work around crime prevention and violence prevention. Everybody, I'm sure a lot of folks have heard of, the Newark Community Street Team, but there's a number of other anti-violence groups that are out there also. And Mayor Baraka actually last year, after George Floyd was murdered, created the Office of Violence Prevention as a city agency, which is building up this year to try and be like the clearinghouse to bring a lot of these community-based violence prevention groups together so that we can coordinate. They can coordinate their efforts better and work to some degree in tandem with the police department. The city is now we hired 100 police officers this year. They're in the academy now. But for every 10 officers that we hired, the city also hired a social worker. So the idea with that is, as people are saying, we got to rethink policing and how we're addressing things, the social workers will be trained alongside our officers, and they'll be available to go out and address a lot of the things that, quite frankly, officers are not trained or prepared to do. There's a whole lot of stuff that police officers are called to because we're the only agency that's available in the middle of the night, 7 days a week. But frankly, we're not trained to deal with, a lot of issues around, obviously, folks who have mental health issues, but there's a lot of repeat calls. There's a lot of places that we go to dealing with victims that are repeat victims, and also offenders that are repeat offenders that may need certain services and so on. So there's tremendous ways in which having the social workers available to complement the law enforcement in Newark will help us decrease those repeat calls, because they'll be available to follow up with victims, particularly those repeat victims, to try and break them out of the cycle of domestic violence, in a different way other than strictly through law enforcement means, especially when that has not been working. So I think there's just a tremendous amount of things going on in Newark that have been positive. I think the city, appropriately so, is starting to be recognized for the work that's been done here. But quite frankly, I think it's just the fact that all of these things have come together in time and in the same place. And there's just a tremendous amount of people in the community that want this to work, that are behind it, that have been pushing for these changes and these reforms, and prayerfully we'll be able to continue with that. And with that, I'll just pass it back to the pastor.
All right. Thank you, Director O'Hara. That was phenomenal. And of course, sisters and brothers, we will be back and entertain questions. And I'll, of course, lead that off to give you all some kind of direction that we will go in tonight. But I want to thank Director O'Hara for coming and sharing with us and agreeing to stay on to answer questions as well. I want to kick it immediately to Director Spruill so that she can have her 15 to 20 minutes as well to share with us some of her ideas and what they're doing in Franklin Township to make policing better. She's in the suburbs. So that's a major issue because we want to know what does suburban policing look like. And so Director Spruill brings that diversity, but she's worked in the hood all her law enforcement life and career. And now she's transitioned to see another side of it in terms of suburban America. Director Spruill, you're home. So I want you to be at home tonight. I don't know if your uncle, Dr. Campbell, is on or not tonight. I don't know if your family is on, but welcome, and you're home. So it's on you, ma'am. It's
All
on
right. Thank you, and good evening, St. James. Good evening, everyone. And I'm happy to be here because I am always here anyway. Newark is my home. I laughed when I heard Director O'Hara say it because someone in Franklin said, "Why do you guys say Newark?" I'm like, I don't know. Doesn't matter where you go to school, it comes out that way. But in Franklin, I think the biggest transition for me was I remember the day that it came out that I had taken the position. I was actually there for 2 weeks, and we had our first homicide. And Director O'Hara, we share this in common. There's a homicide. It's all hands on deck. You get all your information. You want your intel. And so I'm briefing and preparing. And the day went on, and I realized something when I got home. None of my politicians, none of my, constituents asked me anything about the homicide. I'm like, okay, what about the press release? They're like, oh, they do that in 2 days. I'm like, what? So it's a different world. But I'm going to tell you a major, major event for me. There was a large dead deer, and the buzzards were eating off of it. We got so many calls about that I'm like, okay, all right, I'm in Mayberry. I am in Mayberry because I'm like, all right. So, but it's different. And I say we get to work on, one thing at a time. Crime happens everywhere, but, we get to work on one thing at a time. I'm sorry to say this, Director, but, I get my one shooting every couple of months. And I know I drive the men and women crazy because I do it Newark style. We go out, we canvas, and I wasn't quite happy with it. So I took the whole team out there and I showed them how to do it. So I'm like, go knock on doors, find some more evidence, find some more witnesses. And guess what? They did. So I think I bring, a great mindset there because the sense of urgency, as one of my predecessors used to say, did not exist prior to me getting to Franklin. And it's a different way. And I think the men and women are embracing it. The great part about it is they're not fighting it. They're saying, they're opening their eyes and they're seeing that there's opportunities because I've shown them that, you can do better. Last year, 2019, their closeout rate was like 60%. And, I looked at the type of cases that were open. I'm like, these are butter. Like, why isn't this closed? So that 60% went to 80 something percent in just 1 year. Guess what? And I tell them what they can do better because now they're actually sitting on the rock calls. Now they're actually collaborating with, listen, we recover cars that were stolen in Newark. So I told them, I said, okay, do you think all crime just happens in Essex County? I said, they may do their dirt one place, they're going to come back home. I said, we want to share that information. So we partnered. Of course, I go back home with Essex County folks, definitely Newark, East Orange, Irvington, Plainfield. I've taught them how to gather intelligence. Right now, I swear I'm not trying to be Anthony Ambrose, but I'm like, okay, you guys have to, start talking to folks. I'm like, we're going to form a Middlesex Somerset collaboration here for intelligence. What are you guys doing? You cannot work in a silo or vacuum. So that, and Franklin, that's how it is. But one of the great things that I do love, the fact that our crime is not as in depth, is that we have a lot of time to do community policing. We have a lot of time to be out there in the community, and they're doing some awesome things even through COVID, because, and not the normal stuff. And when I say normal, I mean, Coffee with a Cop, yes, that's just a national thing that happens. But, they're doing Cooking with Cops. They have a Franklin Fit program where they do CrossFit. And these things are growing. People are eating it up. They say that law enforcement, you're not social services, but I beg to differ. We are, because we are, besides the fire department, EMS, we are one of the only entities that are there 24/7. You dial 911, we're going to come. Until they develop another way of doing it, we are there. So our mental health program, we're developing, and we're looking for people to hire who have skills in mental health, because when we analyze our use of force data for the past year, 80% of the incidents that we have where we use force involve mental health. And the great part about that is they didn't even go to jail. They never made it to our headquarters. They went straight to the hospital. So that tells us a story right there. It's not our use of force isn't crime related there. It's related to mental health. And we don't want use of force incidents, because guess what? They hurt people. They hurt our officers. They're not good for anyone. I had an incident, and this is a true story. And when I read the reports, I could not believe it. We had an officer who went out, injured his back and his leg because he was struggling with a guy who went into a local supermarket and took 7 bags of shrimp. But he said he was the ambassador of the store and he owned the store. So when I got the injury reports, I'm like, wait a minute, this was over 7 bags of shrimp. And the guy thought he was the owner of the store. And they said, yes. So I said, what was the outcome? Well, our officer was injured, out of work for several months. And this guy, he went to the hospital and got the help that he needed. But it was all over mental health. So we amped up our training in terms of, how to deal with people who are in emotional crisis. We also started training our officers, because one of the things that officers, they don't like to lose. And this is a mindset that was taught, you gotta, the car takes off on you, you gotta catch the car. No, you don't. If you got a plate, you got the information, you can go back and get it later. And we started commending our officers on doing that, because when I first got there, they were zip, 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 chasing cars. I'm like, wait a minute, we can't do that. You have to take a beat. And so now I commend them. The officers, car took off on them. They had the information. They turned it over to the investigative division. And guess what? They went back and they did their work. Listen, eluding is a second-degree crime. The investigative unit, they can handle it. So we were able to do that. I think one of the biggest things too is we had all of the supervisors, and we're going to start working on the officers, trained in emotional intelligence. We are 50% of the issue. Whatever situation you come into, you can only control yourself. So there has to be a change in the mindset of our officers to know that you don't always have to win the argument. You don't always have to win the fight. The most important thing is that everyone goes home safe and you could walk away from it. It doesn't have to end that way. And I think if anyone sees anything on social media these days with conflict outside of our state, throughout our nation with police officers, it is that mindset where they have to win. They have to be the one to gain control. You don't always have to be in control. You really don't. You have to weigh it. Is it really worth it? I think about Dante Wright. It wasn't worth it. They knew who he was. They knew what the warrants were for. They had him on video because they had on body cams. He wants to get in his car, take off, get away. Psh, let him go. Let him go. He didn't point a gun at any of them. He didn't do any of that. So, and I hate to Monday night quarterback or Wednesday night Bible study back, but that was how I see that. They could have waited. So I don't want to go too far past it, but I have one thing I want to share. Let me see. Let me see if I can do this. You can start sharing. It's saying only the host can share.
Melissa, can you all assist, please? Communication team.
I'm sorry. I did tell them I wasn't going to, but I just wanted to show some quick pictures. I didn't have a PowerPoint. I wasn't instructing tonight.
Okay, director, you should be able to hit the share screen
Okay, let me see.
and share your screen.
Oh, there we are. I'm here. Thank you.
Okay, perfect.
All right. All right. I just wanted to share some of the pictures of our Community Relations Bureau. I know, Director O'Hara, I still get your alerts, by the way. I get all your Nixle alerts and your photos, and I see what you guys are doing. Now and then I copy, now and then.
All right, Director Sproul, thank you so much. Thank you so much. You're talking about Black girl power, man. That's it right there. Appreciate you so much. Now at this time, we're going to have a little Q&A. I kick it off, and we come from so many platforms, and our communication team, as you see, is so good at what they do. I just get to drive, and they do all the directing and all of that stuff. And so they spoon feed me the questions that come off of YouTube and off of social media. They'll feed it to me in a private message on Zoom, but I'm also watching social media, so I try to catch a lot of it. And so if you can bring, there it is. They got all three of us. That's what I was looking for. And Director Sproul, at the end, you were showing the wonderful things you're doing in Franklin Township, and it kind of triggered, some of the stuff that I've become responsible for in Newark public safety. And, I had to get used to this whole email thing, this whole email and this tickler. I had to figure out what in the world is a tickler.
Oh, yeah. I have a tickler. I have a tickler system.
Yeah, tickler just come out, Deputy Director Marr, Deputy Director Slaughter. So, and the tickler always has a deadline date at the end. That means you better have this stuff back by this deadline. And so I got a couple of stuff that's due to the director actually on Friday. And some of the programs, and hopefully some of St. James and some of Newark will certainly get involved, like the ambassadors program. I was looking at your pictures and I thought about the ambassadors program, which is for, really for community leaders to come and engage law enforcement, but to work as a conduit between the community and law enforcement. But the biggest thing about our ambassadors program, and of course, because I'm over this stuff now. The biggest thing about the ambassadors program is that it responds to non-police related matters. And that seems to be a big thing that we're dealing with. We're calling law enforcement to come sometimes to situations that are non-police related. But we got the Youth Academy. And so I was thinking about that, and I saw your pictures of the youth and thinking about the Youth Academy, which is going to be the entire month of July. I just got a tickler on that. So we got a meeting on May the 11th to get that finalized, get it back to the director's desk so the director can look over and say, you know what, I check off, let's run with that. And tomorrow I meet with the community leaders that the mayor appointed, 10 of them tomorrow at the 7th precinct. But what we are getting ready to establish is the youth block party. We going to a block everywhere in Newark from June all the way to August. Get the director's approval on that. And that's what you call community policing. And that's why I lifted those things. I want to ask either one of you can jump in there. How important is community policing when we're talking about engaging the community and changing and reforming and making sure that policing is better in our cities? How important is community policing? Either one of you can take that.
I mean, I think it's absolutely essential, right? I mean, I think at the most basic level, the police need to have a relationship with the community. The community needs to view the police as a legitimate authority in the community, and they have to have some level of trust in our agency and in our people, because on the most basic level, this isn't like, TV where crimes are solved based on, some fancy science or something. On the most basic level, we need people to tell us what's going on and what they need us to address. And I think really, the overall theme that Mayor Baraka is moving the police department here is just this idea that, the police are not the only entity that's about public safety, right? Like, the community has to have a role in producing public safety. So that's these other groups that we have, like the street team, community organizations, and so on. Like, it's absolutely essential for us to have relationships for them and for them to take some ownership over public safety. So I think, like, in the past, when they talked about community policing, like for decades, it was just this idea that it's just, there's a community policing unit, or you have like a community meeting once in a while and the cops show up and they tell you what they want to tell you about crime or calls in the area. And that's not what it's about. It's about like actual engagement, doing things purposefully to try and build that trust, build those relationships, and then involving the community in a meaningful way. Like, what was it, like 2 weeks ago on a Tuesday, we were waiting to hear the verdict in the trial for the murder of George Floyd. Right as that was coming up the week prior, the mayor held a meeting, and I invited all our law enforcement partners, the FBI, all the feds, the county prosecutor's office, everybody, the attorney generals, they were there. But then in addition, that's like one half of the room. The other half of the room were, all the community leaders that literally, like, Larry Hamm and the People's Organization for Progress, the street team, the Newark Street Academy, Brick City Peace Collective, like perhaps the most unusual group you would think ever assembled, with like U.S. attorneys and FBI over here, and then all the folks from the community on this here. And the reason was, we wanted to talk about what are we going to do if this verdict goes the other way. And we're going to be looking at a situation which was entirely plausible. That could have happened. All it took was one person, and that could have happened and thrown the whole country into chaos again. And just to show you that that's how committed we are to community involvement with policing, is that those folks had a seat at the table in that room and had a meaningful voice in the planning process to how the city was going to respond, and they had a meaningful role to play. Like you mentioned, Pastor, you mentioned the ambassador program, and you said that yes, it is true that they respond to non-law enforcement matters, but I don't want to let that go without putting the stipulation in there that the work is incredibly meaningful, because just like what the ambassadors do, just like what the street team could do, like in the event of if there was protests, the plan was to have these community-based groups out there to defuse and to de-escalate things before it became necessary to involve the police, right? Which we know, like, if the protest is about the police, it's just not going to end well if cops have to show up and be seen as, using force or dressed in riot gear and stuff like that. And so that's extremely important. And in the same way with, like you mentioned, the ambassador program, Pastor, if you have anyone anyone in the congregation, any community leaders that want to be involved with it, I think it's going to be absolutely essential to have this summer, because I feel like this summer we're coming into a time where everybody's done with COVID. Everybody's sick of being locked up and not being able to go outside. We're going to have a lot of folks going out. We're going to have a lot of, with social media, we're going to have a lot of these block parties and things with large groups that could potentially get out of hand with community complaints and so on. And we need folks like the ambassadors and folks like these community groups to go in there instead of the police and talk to folks. Hey, man, you're going to have to turn this down. Like, there's too many people here. Like, we're going to have to try and clear this out. It's too late. And that's the work that the ambassadors do. That's the work that a lot of community folks have done for us. And it's absolutely necessary, and it's incredibly good work, because it prevents bad things from happening.
Yes, sir. Awesome. Now, Director Spruill, thank you, Director O'Hara. Director Spruill, you said something that really captured my attention, and we got a lot of questions coming in from social media that I'm getting ready to share, and I see some on Zoom as well. Say more about this emotional intelligence thing that you talked about in terms of policing. Can you give us a little bit more? I mean, you teased us a little bit, but I want you to flush it out a little bit more. And then then you can answer this question along with it. Someone asks, how many African-American police officers are on the Franklin Township force?
Okay, so let me go back to emotional intelligence, and then I'll talk about the police force. So the emotional intelligence training that they received, really, so it's a concept that, many colleges and universities teach, in general about psychology and sociology. It's just having that self-evaluation because, listen, cops are human. And that is one of the biggest things that we have to always remember. I think, think about it. In the 80s and the 90s, they had Arnold Schwarzenegger and they had all these other RoboCop movies. And, then we had the war on drugs and, cops were supposed to be superhuman. You're supposed to put on that armor, go to work and leave it all behind you. But that's not how life works. We have to be whole, in every way, spiritually, psychologically, emotionally, everything. When you come to work, you can't have a bad day. That's basically what it amounts to, because it is your profession to do that. And, I think Pastor Soares was talking about, reimagining policing. And when he reimagines policing, he thinks about Franklin, he thinks about what we're doing. And I think it's not reimagining, it's going back to the basics. I'm saying like to the 17th and the 18th century, because policing became something else. They always go back. So I start my classes, I teach at Rutgers too, that, Pastor. And when I start my classes, one of the things I asked during the contemporary policing class, I'm like, what do you think policing is? And what do you think Sir Robert Peel meant when he said that the public are the police and the police are the public? What do you think he meant by that? It goes both ways. The police are paid to do their job, but guess what? It's up to the community, quite frankly, to police what's going on in your neighborhoods, and it's up to the public to police the police. Because if you see something that's not being done right by us, it's our job to do it right. We have to get it right. We have to get it right. I can't tell you this, but every time our lives depend on it, your life may depend on it. And, we want to have that trust. Without that trust, that's any relationship. There is no relationship if we can't trust, the people who are supposed to be protecting and serving us. So going to how many African Americans are in Franklin. So, oh goodness, off the top of my head, I can't remember the total, but I can tell you this. I was able to, with my command staff, increase our, first of all, when I came in, it was about 92 police officers. I'm supposed to be at 109. I know that's like peanuts, Director O'Hara, but so I was able to hire about 13 African American and/or Hispanic and women officers. So that immediately increased the percentage we had to approximately 25% of our force is African American. So that's about 25 police officers. And we did not start out there. We started out at about 11 or 12. So, and it's just having an open mind and looking around, and we're trying to get hometown people. I mean, I snatched one from Newark. I did. just one, but you have a lot to share. But you have to look around. And unfortunately, see, we're not civil service. So I don't get this long list like you do, Director. I get, I either have to call a test or I hire from class 2s, which are the specials, or hire people who went to alternate route or from other police departments. So, we're doing our best. I look for talent, not so much, color, but I will tell you this, I keep an open mind. where there may have been instances where some people would not have even looked twice at certain people.
Awesome. Thank you all. Now we're going to speed it up now because these questions are coming in kind of rapidly.
Mhm.
And Dr. Spruill, you say they are not civil service in Franklin?
We are not. It's a chief's town, which means the chief or director they choose.
Oh, okay. Okay. All right. Director O'Hara, you can probably answer this real quickly. How many officers actually live in the community? Isn't that important? That comes from Facebook. Do we have a percentage off the top of your head?
I don't have that percentage available. I can tell you this though, since Mayor Baraka took over in July of 2014, he's hired over 500 police officers and has dramatically changed the face of the department, literally. So today the department is the Newark Police 80% black and brown, and it's actually over 22% female. So there's been a dramatic change, and certainly the vast majority of those folks are from Newark or lived in Newark, at least when we hired them. But there are some folks, because we are civil service, we've hasn't happened before in my career, but it happened twice recently where they actually exhausted the civil service list of every Newark resident who passed and then had to open it up county-wide. So we actually hired some county residents the last two times we hired because we just did not have enough Newark residents that had taken the test that wanted the job that got to that point. So prayerfully, we're hoping that civil service will open that test again, and we'll do a very active recruiting campaign to make sure we don't have that problem again.
Awesome, because I know at the parole board, we just hired more parole officers, and they have to take that civil service as well. All right, a question from Facebook. This is actually Miss Erica. You can talk to me on the side about PAL. She asked the question, how active is PAL? Kids need to see the police as mentors too. That's actually your pastors under my area. So I answered that on the side. I won't hold them up with that tonight. Let me ask this next question. Director Spruill, do you have clergy and chaplains in your department? If so, what are their job functions?
So absolutely, I do. Franklin, something else that's interesting about Franklin, it is very, very diverse religiously. So, we do have First Baptist, that's one of my go-to churches. We have Community Baptist. We have a lot of Islamic mosque. We have a lot of synagogues. So one of those pictures where you saw the officers lined up with the sign where it says, "We are Franklin," we had a rededication where all the officers took their oath again, because, quite frankly, when I came in, the image that was given to me about the Franklin officers was like, they like to make money. And, that was their label. And I had to talk with them. I said, I cannot believe you took this job just for that. What's going on today in, Minnesota, what's going on throughout the nation, you cannot say that you're doing this job for money, because I'm sure most of you have a bachelor's degree at least, or you have some trade that you can go carry on and do elsewhere. So why are you doing this job? So the clergy, we have several chaplains, but they came over and they spoke to them as well. So what they do is, if we have incidents, Pastor Soares, he's always available. And I plan to have a continued relationship with First Baptist, of course. Community Baptist is right down the street. They come to the precinct. We had 2 incidents where young children died. It wasn't like violent, it was just 2 accidents, and they came out for that to speak to the officers. So they're part of linking us with the community, and they're also part of making sure that the officers have that support that they need.
Amen. And I know that's essential. In Newark, we have loads of chaplains, and we actually have in the department, a chaplain, and some of you all may have seen the yellow car, the clergy vehicle. Got the sirens, the lights, and everything on it as well. But it's serious, and I actually seen it I don't know if I'm supposed to mention this because I have to learn what you can say and what you can't say. But Monday was over at Bradley Court, and it was phenomenal. The prayer by chaplains and to see the work that's going on in places that we don't. That's one of the things, my responsibility is to make sure people know. People have no idea how much community oriented Newark Police or Newark Public Safety really is. The kind of work that's going on, I wish I can get NBC or CNN and all these, and sooner or later we're gonna have to get them in here, because I think Newark is, of course, the place where people can see this is how policing works and this is how it can work out for the good. Someone asked a question about Director O'Hara, which that's another thing on the umbrella. Do you think Newark PD will bring back the DARE program for the students? And I can answer that, Sister McClendon. We actually have CSOs, that's community service officers. They're in these schools each and every day. They're in these schools. May not be like the image of the 90s of the DARE program, but they're in these schools. Some of the CSO officers are clothing some of these kids to go to school. Some of these CSO officers, and these are sworn officers, gun, badge, everything, qualified. They're making sure families have food on their table. The director was talking about soup earlier, and having the soup on the corner, because some of these kids, that's the only meal they get in certain areas of Newark. And so that's Newark PD. And that's why you can go into those communities, because the presence is already there. And because the presence is already there, the respect is there, the trust is there. I know CSO Officer Moore personally already, and he can go into any neighborhood in Newark and everybody be like, oh man, he's a real one. Don't bother them. You know, law enforcement get a pass. I mean, in the roughest of areas. So that's the answer that question. Let me jump back. Director Spruill, is Manville a part of Franklin Township?
Manville is not a part of Franklin Township. It's nearby, but it's not in Franklin.
Okay. Someone asked Director O'Hara, are the program successes being shared with other states and communities? Have they been receptive?
Yeah, actually, you know, especially the last month or so, there's been an incredible amount of interest in what's been happening in Newark, and I've been on, you know, a number of Zooms with the mayor, and the mayor has, you know, he's actually leading a group of other mayors from other cities around the country, and there's all kinds of interest in what is going on in Newark, because the rest of the country, like I said before, did not have the same results that Newark had last year in any of these areas. And so the concern is now just, hey, one, obviously we need to keep it going and build on it. But two, it's like, okay, we need to systematically make sure we have protocols and procedures that are written down so that we can share it with other cities, so that they can try and understand, like, what is it going on here. But it's tough to articulate when you have so much stuff going on at the same time. We've just been very blessed here to have like almost like a perfect storm of factors happening at the same time.
Yes, awesome. Yes, on social media, yes, Newark was in the paper for great police, and actually Sean King, who really is the king of defund the police, actually gave Newark a shout out, because Sean King knew the work that the community organizations were allowed to do in Newark. And I'll be meeting with them, I believe, sometime later, in June, get to sit down with all the community groups, the anti-violence coalitions and all of those, and get an opportunity to sit down with them. And that's why, Sister Hightower, that Newark policing is working, and that model is working, because the community has a seat at the table. Hence, I'm actually get to sit at the table. Here's another question. When someone gets pulled over for a traffic violation, are we allowed to refuse to step out of the car if we feel scared and wait for a commander? When we are asked if they can search our car, is it right to refuse and not be punished for refusal? Anyone can handle that, whichever one of you all want to get that loaded question.
Okay. So, you know, so one of the things I also participate in is the National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Executives, and I'm on the executive board, and we have a program called The Law in Your Community. And what we tell our citizens, one of the things that you have to remember is that driving is a privilege. So if you are pulled over by police officers and they're asking you for your credentials, you must give your credentials. It's part of driving. If you're walking down the street and someone just asks you for your credentials for no good reason, that's a different situation. But when you're driving, there's certain things that you have to do. So if an officer asks you when you're driving for your credentials, they ask you to step out of the vehicle, yes, you should comply with that. Now, if they ask you to search your vehicle, you have the right to refuse that. And if the officer has enough probable cause, they would get a warrant for that. So that's how that works. I think, did I answer all of those questions? I know there's several of them in there.
Got it. You got it.
And I slept on my IA hat as well.
Old internal affairs. Lord have mercy. All right.
Yeah.
And this is coming from an officer, Jason McPhail. The community and law enforcement must have a working relationship to be efficient and effective. That's coming from a law enforcement officer. This is actually on social media and on Zoom. Do the police officers have to take psychological testing? Or it was also asked in another way, how often are the police officers required to take a psychological test?
Yeah, so every police officer in New Jersey must have a psychological exam prior to becoming an officer. And then, the director and I have the authority to order officers to take an exam for various reasons, like if there's some question about their fitness for duty or that type of thing.
And I have so in Franklin also, and I don't want to stir anything. I know you guys are civil service, but because it's a chief's town, I have the authority to have in our ordinance, if you're going to get promoted, you have to take another psychological exam
Wow.
prior to being promoted. So you have to pass, and actually a physical also before you're promoted.
Okay.
Wow.
Mhm.
Director O'Hara, this is a question. Could you give us an update on sexual assault team in Newark?
So the Shani Baraka Center opened a couple of years ago on Clinton Avenue, and that's where we house the special victims that investigate those types of crimes. And embedded with them are the first three social workers actually that we had hired. They've been with us for over a year now. It's before COVID. And they work together with the special victims unit addressing sexual assault.
Okay, here's another one. Either one of you can grab it. Are officers tested periodically for drug and alcohol use? Thinking about their stress level, and I guess that's the gist of that question. Are they tested periodically for drugs and alcohol abuse?
Yes, we're required to test. I think it's like 12% or 12.5% of the department, and it's like twice a year now. I think there's a percentage we're required. For us,
Right.
it's a lot. It's not easy to do that many twice a year, and then we also test when there's legally they call it reasonable suspicion, when there's some objective reasons why we think an officer may be doing illegal drugs. That all that stuff is specific to drugs. We don't test for alcohol, but like obviously, unless there's a reason, right? Unless somebody comes to work and they're operating a vehicle and it's obvious, just in the same way anyone else would be tested for alcohol.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Somebody said, heads up, Pastor. Much work is needed in Bradley Court. Oh, no, I was at home. I grew up around Lake Man projects in Orlando, so you can get out of Lake Man alive. You can handle Bradley Court. Somebody asked, is it because there's a black mayor and more black cops that make their numbers better? The reason we have more black cops is because of someone like Mayor Baraka.
I think it was purposeful. I think there were deliberate efforts to diversify the department, and it's not just along issue racial lines of color and so on. The department today in Newark is incredibly diverse. I mean, we have people that are immigrants from different countries in Africa, literally, folks who immigrated from places in the Middle East, and different places. And then same thing along like ethnic lines, folks who are Latino. Traditionally, most of my career, folks were for the majority just Puerto Rican. Occasionally there's somebody from the Dominican Republic. Today, there's folks who are immigrants from different places in South America, Peru and Ecuador and Colombia. Brazil. Like it's incredibly diverse in ways that are much deeper than just that. And folks who speak all kinds of languages now. Before it would just be like Spanish and Portuguese. Like we have people that speak all kinds of languages because it is so diverse today.
And can I say this? I think when a police department is diverse, I think it attracts more diversity because other people, Black and brown people and women, they see that and they want to go there because, they feel welcome. They feel like, hey, they can do it. I can do it. I can be there too.
All right, last question, because I promised both of these directors they would be off at 8 o'clock. Here's the last question. Because the officers are under the Civil Service Commission, is it harder to discipline or fire them for bad behavior?
So I would say that the system, not just in New Jersey or not just with civil service, it's across the country. Frequently, that police executives issue discipline only for it to be later overturned. Whether it's through, there's different processes, arbitration, mediation, and so on. And I think that's something that people see and they hear, that they listen to the Derek Chauvin trial, like they heard he had like 19 disciplinary problems beforehand. It is difficult for police executives to remove problem officers at times and keep them off. That's definitely something that's a problem across the country, not just with civil service.
Awesome.
Right.
Awesome.
So one of the things is, I'm sorry, Pastor, one of the things too that you have to keep in mind, it's just like any type of labor action. There has to be progressive discipline. There has to be a process. And, with civil service, it is a little more difficult. They have, quite a few steps that they have to go through. I mean, in my department, it is a little difficult because you have to have progressive discipline. But now in New Jersey, we're mandated to have an early warning system. So someone like Chauvin would not have made it through the police department without being on an early warning system. And that early warning system can look like sending someone for fitness for duty. It could look like sending someone, for extensive retraining or reassignment and things like that. So we do have options. We do.
Right. And I see more questions. Listen, you all, we're out of time. Someone asked about restorative justice. Come back the third week. We got activists on. And then come on back to last week, we got a civil rights lawyer on. We can deal with restorative justice then. Sister Elijah asked about tabletop exercise, often play critical situations. I've been in simulators. Yes, they go through all of that training and I'm telling you, it ain't easy. I had to shoot somebody and I wasn't trained to shoot like an officer. People always ask, why do officers don't shoot the wound? That's not how they're trained. They're trained to shoot center mass. They're trained to make sure they take out the subject. And in most cases also, I end up shooting them in the arm, but I disarmed the individual. And then the person with the knife, I talked her down. I didn't have to tase her. I was able to talk her down, although she was coming at me. I was 2 seconds to put her down, but it's just those kind of situations. So, hey, y'all, I want to thank y'all. Y'all been a great crowd tonight. Y'all been awesome. I want to thank you. My director's in his office after hours. He needs to be going home. He got a lot to deal with, and same thing for Director Spruill. So thank you all for your time. I cannot pay you for your time. You all have given us valuable expertise tonight, off the cuff, no script. You all gave it to us good tonight. Next week, Mayor Raz J. Baraka, the one and only, is our guest next week. And, he don't care what kind of questions y'all throw at him. He's going to come back the same way you come at him. So y'all just be prepared for it next week. So Mayor Baraka will come and talk about his vision for policing in the city of Newark. And then we'll take questions and answers from that as well. And so the following week, we have activists who have been around the world. Reverend Dr. Charles Boyer and Reverend Stephen Green will be our guests. And then the last week, Salvation for Social Justice, Social Justice Institute, New Jersey Social Justice Institute, Ryan Haygood, they will be our guests. So thank you all so much. You all have been wonderful. St. James, I love you all. I love you. Mother's Day is coming this Sunday. I'm excited about Mother's Day. I wish you all could come. I wish we could gather. But at the right time, we'll be able to gather again at the right time. Meanwhile, I want to encourage you to get your vaccinations. If you have not been vaccinated, we need you to do that so we can get back together in that sanctuary. Make sure that we're not spreading COVID-19. All of our units tomorrow will be updated so that whenever we cut the air condition on or whatnot, we know that it's not breathing out or pushing out SARS or COVID and all of that other stuff, because it will have the most up-to-date parts on there. So thank you all so much. I know the governor is increasing the indoor gatherings, or something is supposed to come out in a few weeks. We're not there yet. I told someone today in Trenton, when all y'all go to the Giants game, about 90,000 of y'all, 50,000, how many they're holding, y'all don't come out of there dying, then that's a good sign for me to go ahead and open back up. If y'all can go in there and sit among each other and none of y'all die, that'll be a good sign to open back up. Until then, y'all can cuss me out, call me whatever you want to call me. Some people gonna go to other churches. Y'all got to do what you got to do. I'm doing what I got to do to keep people safe, so that we are having less funerals than we've been having. Been a whole lot of funerals at these funeral homes, a whole lot of funerals I've been to, and I don't want to keep seeing those numbers continue to rise. Love y'all with the love of Jesus Christ. Look forward to seeing you all, of course, on Sunday morning. Thank you all so much. Thank you so much. The Lord bless you and keep you tonight. And I want the Lord to allow his face to shine upon you and to be gracious unto you. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, let's unmute everybody. Come on, let's bring everybody out. Facebook, love y'all tonight. Facebook, YouTube, I love you all. Website,
Great meeting.
Thank you.
Great,
Thank you,
fantastic.
Director.
Amen.
Director.
Thank you. Wonderful information.
Great meeting.
Doing what you're doing.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Pastor.
Great information.
Thank you.
Goodbye, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Excellent job, directors.
See you.
Excellent job.
Goodbye.
Hello. Good night.
Good night.
stay safe.
Stay safe.
Have a good
Job
night.
for you
Good
too
night,
as
Lola.
well, Doc.
Good
Night.
Have a good night.
Absolutely. Thank you for putting it together, Doc.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
I'm trying to figure out why members of our family come on Zoom and don't open their camera. Y'all can go.
Get on them, Doc. Get on them.
Y'all in 14 months and you come on.
Get on them, Doc.
Put some on your head or something.
I said, throw your wig on.
Oh.
Put your headpiece on.
I even got new members on here I never seen, and I'll never get to see them. All right. We're going to gather soon. It's going to happen.
All right.
Now I see Brother Clancy. Thank you, man. I see everything you, man, in a long time. God bless you. Tell your mama. All right. Good night, everybody.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Oh, I enjoyed this. Yeah, this was great.
I think that's it.
Good evening, Sneeze. Thank you for your time.
Oh,
This is Anthony. Hey, Anthony.
Hey, how you doing, darling?
Good, and you?
I'm
Hey,
doing
Phyllis
well.
and
Thanks for
Sam.
asking.
Hi, Joanne. I'm good.
Thank you.
Be quiet, Sam. You supposed to sit